Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Secretary, for setting out the policy framework that PNG is delivering for investors. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Australia promotes investment opportunities in our economy to the world. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, and also to note that Australia has about 26 billion Australian dollars invested in PNG, and indeed many people here this week are operationalising that investment every day. But as PNG thinks about how it seeks to attract, promote and facilitate that investment, we thought we'd just share a little about Australia's experience. So the first thing we do at Austrade is we try to align our investment strategy with the government's broad economic priorities. So here in Australia, two of the key priorities that our government talk about are net zero, transformation and economic security. And if we think about Australia's challenge in decarbonising its electricity grid, in building a green or renewable hydrogen sector, in making our economy more circular and sustainable, and building out a greener transport infrastructure grid, it's pretty clear that most of the investment that will be required to deliver that change in our economy will have to come from the private sector. So when Austrade looks at its global strategy, it focuses on those sectors of broad importance to the government. The second area of key importance for us in our work is what the Australian government calls its economic security agenda. So like many different economies around the world, Australia is seeking to enhance and build out its domestic sovereign manufacturing capability. And I think the important thing in the context of two economies with a significant energy and resources base, like Australia and PNG, is that the government is seeking to make investments in parts of the economy where Australia has some comparative advantage, or where there are strong sovereignty and national security reasons to try and build out our capability in Australia, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, when we saw global value chains under tremendous pressure. So with that in mind, the government's identified a number of sectors that are key priorities for international investment in that context, and they include things like clean energy manufacturing, and the battery value chain, and importantly, building out more upstream capability in our critical minerals sector, where Australia, like PNG, has a very strong mineral endowment, but where we would like to see more value added domestically to these minerals before, in many cases, they're exported to other large economies in our region. The one other area of focus for the team that I look after is called the Southeast Asia Deals Team, and the Australian government made an announcement last year, the Prime Minister did, in Jakarta, which was focused on supporting Australian investment into our region. And so we have a unit that is working on identifying opportunities across Southeast Asia for Australian corporate and institutional investment. So when we look at Australia's FDI history over the last 20 years or so, Australia's economy really since European settlement has always been underpinned by foreign investment and foreign capital. We've had traditionally a relatively small population relative to our land mass and resources base, and we've always needed foreign capital to most efficiently and productively develop the resources we have. And so if you look at that chart, you can see that foreign investment across our economy since 2003, around the time when the mining boom really accelerated, has grown very strongly and really underpinned Australia's broader economic growth. And there's been strong bipartisan and community support for foreign investment in Australia over that period of time. And you can see that as a percentage of our GDP, that stock of foreign investment is now sitting at over 180%. And I think Australia really is an example of an economy that has been open to foreign investment flows historically from a number of different source markets, and that foreign investment has underpinned very strong growth rates, particularly for a developed economy, and has been a key part of Australia's broader economic success story. So when we look at our total stock of FDI and the sources of investment into the Australian economy, you can see that some of our large traditional economic partners are unsurprisingly represented there, with the US, UK and Japan, three of our largest historic sources of investment. Over the last 20 years, we've seen Canadian pension funds make big investments in Australian infrastructure in particular. So Canada is now a very significant investor. Interestingly, when we look at rapidly growing stocks of foreign investment in Australia, our region, in particular Southeast Asia, is growing quite rapidly. Later we'll hear from Chris from Treasury, who will talk perhaps a little bit about our framework. And FIRB produces a quarterly report which shows what sectors that investment is flowing into. And this chart actually really illustrates, one, that the Australian economy is fairly diversified. So you can see at the top there, unsurprisingly, mineral exploration and development has continued to see very robust flows of investment, but interestingly, services is very, very high in 23 as well. And broadly, foreign investment tracks sectors of importance in the Australian economy, which shows that we're a very, very open economy within the context of our foreign investment review framework to international investment. And I think, we recognise that capital is footloose, that you have to compete for it, and that we're competing with, a world of different countries with different incentives and different frameworks. And so having that balance between being very open to foreign investment flows and a robust investment review framework has really been central to our investment story. So that's just a very, very quick overview of how we do investment promotion at a national level in Australia. Our states and territories are also in international markets, talking about opportunities in their economies. And, really the key thing that has underlined our strategy for a long period of time has been to focus on sectors where Australia has comparative advantage and is globally competitive, and to align our strategy closely to government priorities so that we can have a strong pipeline of international investors coming into the Australian economy. And just to close, what that looks like in sort of practical terms for an Austrade investment team, we might have an investor somewhere in our region who engages with our office on the ground and says that they've identified an early stage opportunity in Australia but don't have strong connections or don't know the market very well. We'll provide a set of insights and information to them, and then when they're ready to come to Australia, we have a team here that will facilitate a market visit for them and make introductions to government, potential partners, state governments, lawyers, banks and others, so that investor can take a look at the market and we hope make an investment in Australia with reduced risk and complexity and more quickly than they otherwise might. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and best wishes for the rest of the conference.